The cracked sidewalk radiated heat through the thin soles of my worn-out sneakers. Summer in Chicago had always been brutal, but this year felt particularly merciless. Perhaps because everything else in my life had also turned against me. Sweat trickled down my spine as I watched my 4-year-old son, Jamie, standing bravely beside his little blue bicycle, clutching a crooked cardboard sign he'd insisted on making himself. "Buy my bike, sir, please. Mommy's hungry," he'd written in wobbly, oversized letters, with the stubby crayon from the diner where I'd lost my waitressing job last week. The sight of it made my heart crack into 1,000 pieces. "Jamie, honey, you don't have to do this," I whispered, kneeling beside him despite the heat burning through my worn jeans. "We can find another way." He shook his head, his small jaw set with determination that no child his age should have to show. "No, Mommy. You didn't eat yesterday. I saw you give me your sandwich." The truth of his words stung worse than any physical pain. At 4 years old, my son was already sacrificing for me, already noticing things no child should have to notice. I blinked back tears as he turned his attention to a middle-aged man walking past. "Buy my bike, sir, please," Jamie called out, his high voice earnest as he pointed to his prized possession. "It's a really good bike. I can ride real fast on it." The man barely glanced at him, clutching his coffee cup tighter as if we might try to steal it. The 5th rejection that morning. I swallowed the humiliation burning in my throat and squeezed Jamie's small shoulder. 3 blocks down from our apartment, if you could call that roach-infested single-room an apartment, we had stationed ourselves near the entrance of Lincoln Park, where affluent families strolled with designer strollers and professionals rushed to meetings with the kind of purpose I had long forgotten. We didn't belong here, but desperation had pushed us into territories we would normally avoid. "Mommy?" Jamie looked up at me, his small face suddenly pinched. "I'm hungry too, a little bit." The words cut deeper than any knife. I knelt down, the concrete rough against my knee where my jeans had worn through, and brushed his hair from his forehead. "I know, baby. Just a little longer, okay? Someone will buy your bike, and then we'll get something really yummy." The lie tasted sour. Even if we sold the bike, optimistically hoping for $40, it would barely cover the medicine Jamie needed for his ear infection, with perhaps enough left over for a meal from the dollar menu. Our eviction notice, pink and final, was folded in my back pocket, the deadline looming tomorrow morning. "Can I get another bike after?" His innocent question nearly shattered me. "We'll get you an even better one, when Mommy finds a new job," I promised, knowing how empty those words were. No one wanted to hire a 26-year-old high school dropout with a spotty work history and a child to care for, especially not after what happened with Nick. Nick. The thought of him sent a wave of nausea through me. The father of my child, the man who had convinced me he loved us both, right up until the moment he cleaned out our meager savings account and disappeared with his actual girlfriend. A girlfriend who apparently had known about me, the pathetic side piece, all along. He'd left me with nothing but $500 in debt to people who, as I'd recently discovered, weren't the type to accept delayed payments. A black SUV with tinted windows glided to a stop at the curb several yards away. I barely noticed it, too focused on helping Jamie adjust the price tag he'd carefully attached to the handlebars. $50 originally, now crossed out and replaced with $40. Soon we'd have to go lower. "Is that your sign, little man?" The deep voice startled us both. Jamie straightened quickly, and I instinctively moved closer to my son. A man stood before us, tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to see his face. Expensive suit, dark blue, tailored to fit broad shoulders. Italian leather shoes that probably cost more than 6 months of our rent. He wasn't old. Early 30s perhaps, with olive skin and features that belonged on a luxury watch advertisement. "Yes, sir," Jamie replied, more confident with strangers than any child should be. "I'm selling my bike because my mommy needs food." I felt heat rush to my face, mortification washing over me in waves. "Jamie, that's not, we don't need to," I stammered, then fell silent under the stranger's intense gaze. His eyes, dark, assessing, scanned my face with uncomfortable intensity. There was something dangerous in that gaze, something that made the tiny hairs on my arms stand up despite the heat. "What's your name?" he asked, looking directly at me. "Elena," I answered, then bit my tongue. Why had I given my real name? His eyes shifted to Jamie. "And you, brave young man?" "James Nicholas Parker," Jamie announced proudly, using his full name the way children do when they want to sound grown up. "But everybody calls me Jamie, Nicholas." I winced at the middle name, a reminder of Jamie's father that I couldn't bring myself to change. The man's expression changed subtly at the mention of Nicholas, a tightening around his eyes that was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. He crouched down to Jamie's level, his expensive suit touching the dirty sidewalk without concern. "And you're selling this bike to buy food for your mother?" "Yes, sir," Jamie nodded solemnly. "And medicine for my ear. It hurts." The man reached into his jacket, and I instinctively stepped forward, my hand on Jamie's shoulder. But he only produced a wallet. Alligator leather, I guessed, and pulled out several bills. "I'll give you $500 for it." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. $500? It's just a child's bike. It's not even... Is 500 not enough? His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or curiosity. "I can offer more." A chill ran down my spine despite the suffocating heat. Nobody paid $500 for a used children's bicycle with bent training wheels. Nobody. Why? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Let's say I'm investing in a good cause." His eyes drifted to Jamie again, lingering on my son's face in a way that made my protective instincts flare. "I don't think..." "700, he interrupted, still holding the cash, having added more bills. "Final offer," Jamie gasped, his eyes wide with disbelief. $700? That's more than all the money in the world. Despite everything, a small smile tugged at my lips. In Jamie's world, 700 might as well be $1 million. My mind raced. $700 would cover Jamie's medicine, our overdue rent, enough food for weeks, maybe even a security deposit on a better place. But the money felt dangerous, tainted somehow by this stranger's inexplicable interest. A sleek black sedan pulled up behind the SUV, and a man in a dark suit stepped out, scanning the area before opening the rear passenger door. The man standing before me didn't turn to look, but his posture shifted subtly, and I realized he was expected elsewhere. "I need to go," he said, his eyes still fixed on me. "Take the money." He extended his hand toward Jamie, the bills neatly folded between his fingers. Something told me to refuse, to grab my son and the bike and run as fast as we could in the opposite direction. But Jamie's stomach growled audibly, and the weight of the eviction notice seemed to burn in my pocket. Jamie looked up at me, silently asking permission. I hesitated, then gave a small nod, with a solemn face that broke my heart. My son reached for the money, his tiny hand engulfed by the stranger's much larger one. As Jamie took the cash, the man's other hand moved to ruffle my son's hair, the gesture oddly gentle. "You're a brave young man, looking after your mother like this." Then he turned to me, reaching into his pocket to produce a business card, pressing it into my palm. "Call this number tonight, after your son is asleep." His gaze flickered to Jamie again, this time with a strange intensity that made my skin crawl. "We have much to discuss about James's father." My blood ran cold. "Who are you?" "Someone who's been looking for you." He turned and walked toward the waiting car, his movements fluid and controlled. The driver held the door as he slid into the back seat. Just before the door closed, he looked back at us, his expression unreadable. "Keep the bike," he called to Jamie. "You're going to need it." The car pulled away, merging seamlessly into traffic, leaving us frozen on the sidewalk with $700 clutched in Jamie's small hand and a plain white business card in mine. Only a name was printed on it, Alexander Volkov. Jamie looked up at me, confusion and excitement warring on his face. "Mommy? We can keep the bike and the money?" I stared at the retreating car, a sense of foreboding washing over me. "Yes, baby. We can." "Then we can buy food? And medicine for my ear?" "Yes," I whispered, still staring at the card, my thumb tracing over the embossed letters. Alexander Volkov, a name that sounded like danger, like a door I shouldn't open, but he knew Nick, and Nick had taken everything from us. As I pocketed the card and helped Jamie count the money, I wondered which was more dangerous, calling the number, or not calling it. Either way, I sensed our lives had just changed irreversibly, like a car veering off the edge of a cliff. All I could do now was brace for impact. "Come on, Jamie," I said, forcing brightness into my voice as he gripped the bicycle handlebars with pride. "Let's get us some food and your medicine." As we walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced back once, half expecting to see the black car following us, but the street was filled only with ordinary people going about their ordinary lives I suddenly suspected we would never have again. The small pharmacy on the corner of Diversey and Clark had never looked so welcoming. With Jamie's prescription clutched in my hand and his small fingers wrapped around mine, I pushed through the door, the cool air conditioning a blessed relief from the oppressive heat outside. "Can I have cherry Coke, Mommy?" Jamie asked, eyeing the refrigerator case filled with drinks. For once, I didn't have to say no. "Sure, baby, pick whatever you want." His face lit up with the kind of joy that made my chest ache. $700 was enough to say yes to a soda without calculating how many meals that would cost us. $700 meant medicine, food, and rent. It meant a momentary reprieve from the constant, grinding anxiety of poverty. But as I handed over the prescription to the pharmacist, I couldn't shake the unease that clung to me like a shadow. Money that came too easily usually came with strings attached. A lesson I'd learned repeatedly since dropping out of high school to follow Nick's empty promises. "It'll be about 15 minutes, the pharmacist said, barely looking up. "That'll be $47.50. I counted out the bills from the wad in my pocket, hyper-aware of how unusual it was for someone like me, in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt, to be paying with crisp $100 bills. But the pharmacist simply made change and waved us toward the waiting area. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" I asked Jamie, who was already sipping his cherry Coke with the reverence usually reserved for rare treats. He nodded enthusiastically. "Can we get pizza? Real pizza, not the kind from the freezer that tastes like cardboard?" I smiled despite myself. "Yes, we can get real pizza." I didn't add that we hadn't had even freezer pizza in over a week, subsisting instead on canned soup and whatever the food bank had offered. While we waited for the prescription, I guided Jamie to the small grocery section and filled a basket with essentials: bread, milk, peanut butter, fruit, things I hadn't been able to afford in too long. The business card from Alexander Volkov burned in my pocket, a constant reminder that our sudden windfall came with an implicit deadline. Tonight, after Jamie was asleep. Back in our dingy one-room apartment, with its water-stained ceiling and temperamental plumbing, Jamie sat cross-legged on our pull-out sofa bed, happily devouring his second slice of pizza. The medicine had already eased the pain in his ear, and with a full stomach, he looked more like the carefree child he should be, rather than the solemn boy who'd stood on a street corner trying to sell his bicycle for his hungry mother. "Mommy, who was that man?" he asked suddenly, tomato sauce ringing his mouth. "The one who gave us all the money?" I carefully wiped his face with a napkin, buying time. "Just someone who wanted to help us." "But why did he want to talk about Daddy?" My hand stilled. Of course Jamie had caught that detail. He missed nothing. "I don't know, sweetheart. Is he going to find Daddy and make him come back?" The innocent hope in his voice made my stomach clench. Jamie barely remembered Nick, who'd been gone for almost 2 years now. But he clung to the idea of his father with the desperate optimism only a child could maintain. "I don't think so, baby," I said gently. "But we're doing okay. Just you and me, aren't we?" He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the small framed photo on our rickety side table. The only picture I'd kept of Nick, taken when Jamie was barely 2. Nick with his arm around me, both of us smiling. Jamie between us reaching for the camera with chubby hands. A perfect little family. What a lie that had been. "Time for your bath," I announced, changing the subject. "And then maybe we can watch a movie before bed." "The one with the dinosaurs?" His eyes lit up. The DVD of Jurassic Park was another relic from better days. Watched so many times it occasionally skipped, but Jamie never tired of it. Of course. An hour later, Jamie was clean, in fresh pajamas, and curled against my side on our sagging sofa bed, his eyes heavy as the familiar movie played on our second-hand TV. I stroked his hair, still damp from the bath, and felt the familiar surge of fierce love that had kept me going through the darkest days. For him, I would do anything. even call a mysterious stranger who seemed to know too much about us. When Jamie's breathing finally deepened into sleep, I carefully extracted myself from his side and stood at our single window, looking down at the street below. The neighborhood wasn't the worst in Chicago, but it wasn't somewhere I felt safe letting Jamie play outside alone. The streetlights cast yellow pools on the cracked sidewalk, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, the constant urban soundtrack I'd long since learned to tune out. I pulled Volkov's card from my pocket and stared at it under the harsh light of our bare bulb. Just a name, embossed in simple black letters on heavy cream stock. No company, no position, no phone number. I flipped it over, and there it was, 10 digits written in precise handwriting. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my phone, an ancient model that somehow still worked despite its cracked screen. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keypad. Whatever this was, whatever Volkov wanted, I was stepping into it willingly, eyes open. I punched in the number before I could talk myself out of it. 1 ring, 2, then Elena. Not a question. He'd been waiting for my call. I sank onto the edge of the sofa bed, careful not to disturb Jamie. How did you know it would be me? No one else has this number. His voice was the same as earlier, deep, slightly accented, unnervingly calm. What do you want? I asked, fighting to keep my own voice steady. How do you know Nick? A brief silence then. Nicholas Foster, 31 years old, born in Evanston, computer science dropout from Northwestern, excellent con man, even better thief. Each fact delivered with clinical precision. I gripped the phone tighter. That doesn't answer my question. No, it doesn't. I could almost hear the smile in his voice. I prefer not to discuss such matters over the phone. Are you free tomorrow morning? I glanced at Jamie, sleeping peacefully. I have my son. Of course. Bring him. My driver will collect you at 9. I'm not getting into a car with you. I don't even know who you are. A soft laugh, surprisingly warm. Cautious. Good. Then perhaps you'd prefer a public place. The Lincoln Park Zoo opens at 9. The sea lion pool. My associate will find you. The zoo was safe. Public. Jamie would love it. We hadn't been able to afford the entrance fee in months. Still, I hesitated. Why should I meet you at all? Because, Elena Parker, he said, my full name sending a chill down my spine. Nicholas stole something that belongs to me. Something far more valuable than what he took from you. And I think perhaps we can help each other recover what we've lost. Before I could respond, he continued, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly. Your son. His ear infection. The medicine is working? The question, so unexpected and ordinary, threw me. Yes. How did you? Children should not suffer for their parents' mistakes, he interrupted, his voice suddenly harder. I've taken the liberty of arranging an appointment for him tomorrow afternoon. A specialist. The address will be texted to you. I can't afford a specialist, I said automatically. It's been handled. The finality in his tone brooked no argument. Why are you doing this? I whispered, confused and increasingly unnerved by his interest in my son. A pause, longer this time. Let's just say I have a particular interest in seeing Nicholas Foster face the consequences of his actions. 9 o'clock, Elena. The sea lion pool. The line went dead before I could respond. I sat in the dim light of our apartment, the phone still clutched in my hand, my mind racing. Volkov knew things he shouldn't know. About Nick, about me, about Jamie's ear infection. He had money, power, and an agenda I couldn't begin to understand, and somehow, I'd become part of it. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. An address on Michigan Avenue, with a doctor's name and a time, 2:30 p.m., followed by another message. Car will be provided. Children deserve the best care. I set the phone down on the table with shaking hands. What had Nick stolen from this man? What kind of person arranged medical specialists for strangers' children while speaking of theft and consequences in the same breath? The answers, I suspected, would only lead to more questions. But one thing was becoming clear. Alexander Volkov wasn't simply a generous stranger. He was something far more dangerous. A man with the power and resources to find people who didn't want to be found. A man who didn't hesitate to insert himself into our lives with calculated precision. I crawled back onto the sofa bed beside Jamie, wrapping my arm around his small, warm body. He mumbled something in his sleep and curled closer. For this child, I reminded myself, I would walk into the lion's den. For this child, I would do whatever it took to secure a better future than our present. But as sleep eluded me, one thought kept circling. What exactly had Nick taken from Alexander Volkov, and why did I have the sinking feeling that Jamie and I were now being used as bait in a trap set for Nick? Morning came too quickly, sunlight streaming through our thin curtains and painting stripes across Jamie's sleeping face. I'd barely slept, my mind too full of questions and half-formed fears, but seeing his peaceful expression strengthened my resolve. Whatever game Volkov was playing, I would play it on my terms, with Jamie's well-being as my only priority. "Wake up, sweetheart," I whispered, gently stroking his cheek. "We're going to the zoo today." His eyes flew open, sleep forgotten instantly. "The zoo? Really? With the lions and monkeys and everything?" "Everything," I promised, smiling at his excitement. "But first, breakfast." We ate cereal with fresh milk, another luxury we hadn't enjoyed in weeks, and I helped Jamie dress in his cleanest clothes. I did the same, choosing the least worn of my jeans and a simple blue t-shirt that had once been Nick's, but had long since become mine. I pulled my dark hair into a neat ponytail and even applied a touch of mascara, armor of a sort, making me feel slightly more in control. The walk to Lincoln Park Zoo took 20 minutes, Jamie chattering excitedly the whole way, his small hand warm in mine. I nodded and smiled at his enthusiasm, but my eyes constantly scanned our surroundings, looking for black cars, for men in suits, for any sign that we were being watched. The zoo was already busy when we arrived, families with strollers and young children crowding the entrance. Jamie bounced on his toes as we made our way inside, his earlier illness seemingly forgotten in the thrill of the outing. I steered us toward the sea lion pool, my stomach tightening with each step. "Look, Mommy, they're swimming." Jamie broke free of my grip and ran to the railing around the pool, where sleek shapes glided through the water with effortless grace. I hurried after him, paranoia making me imagine dangers lurking in every shadow. But when I reached the railing, there was only Jamie, his face alight with wonder, and a few other children and parents enjoying the morning sun. "They're so fast," Jamie breathed, watching a sea lion slice through the water. "Can I be that fast when I swim?" "Maybe with practice," I said, scanning the area again. 9 o'clock had come and gone. Had Volkov changed his mind, or was this some sort of test? He likes the sea lions. That's good. I find them rather peaceful myself. I whirled around, heart hammering. A woman stood behind us, elegantly dressed in a cream pantsuit that screamed money, her dark hair cut in a sleek bob that framed sharp cheekbones and assessing eyes. She wasn't what I'd expected. "You're Volkov's associate?" I asked cautiously. She smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. "Katerina Orlova. You can call me Kat. And you must be Elena." Her gaze shifted to Jamie, who was still transfixed by the sea lions. "And this is James." "Jamie," I corrected automatically, stepping slightly in front of my son. "Where's Volkov?" "Alexander is a busy man. He sent me to bring you to him." She glanced at her watch. Slim, gold, probably worth more than everything I owned. "We should go. He doesn't like to be kept waiting." I said I wouldn't get in a car with strangers. Her smile widened fractionally. "Then it's fortunate we're not strangers anymore, isn't it?" She held out her hand to Jamie, who had finally noticed her presence. "Hello, Jamie. Would you like to see some tigers today?" Jamie looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "Can we, Mommy?" I hesitated, caught between caution and the knowledge that we were already too deep in whatever this was to back out now. "Where exactly are we going?" "Just to the other side of the park," Kat replied smoothly. "Alexander has a private viewing area. The tigers are much more active in the morning. A private viewing area at a public zoo. Just how much influence did this man have? "Please, Mommy." Jamie tugged at my hand. "I want to see the tigers." I looked from his hopeful face to Kat's impassive one. "All right," I conceded. "But we stay in public areas and we'll leave any time I say so." Kat's smile never faltered. "Of course." As we followed her through the zoo, Jamie skipping alongside us, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking willingly into a spider's web, drawn by curiosity and desperation in equal measure. And somewhere at the center of that web waited Alexander Volkov, a man who knew too much about us, who had $700 to spare for a child's bicycle, and who, for reasons I couldn't fathom, had taken a particular interest in the welfare of my son. The private viewing area turned out to be a secluded pavilion overlooking the tiger habitat, cordoned off with discreet velvet ropes that a uniformed zoo employee silently removed as we approached. The space was furnished with comfortable chairs and a small table laden with pastries, fruit, and a silver carafe that I assumed contained coffee. It looked like something out of a luxury safari resort, not a public city zoo. "Tigers!" Jamie gasped, rushing to the railing. Below, 3 massive Siberian tigers prowled their territory, muscles rippling beneath their striped coats. One of them, as if on cue, looked up directly at us and let out a rumbling sound that was somewhere between a purr and a growl. "The large male is called Victor," said a now familiar voice from behind us. "He was rescued from an illegal private collection in Moscow. Magnificent creature, isn't he?" I turned to find Alexander Volkov stepping into the pavilion, dressed more casually than yesterday in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. He looked different in daylight, younger perhaps, but no less intimidating. "Mr. Volkov," I acknowledged, instinctively positioning myself between him and Jamie. "Alexander, please." His dark eyes moved past me to where Jamie was pressed against the railing, enthralled by the tigers. "Your son seems to appreciate Victor." "Children are easily impressed by dangerous things," I replied, the double meaning not lost on either of us. "They don't recognize the threat until it's too late." His lips curved in a hint of a smile. "Perceptive." He gestured to the table. "Please help yourself. The almond croissants are particularly good." Jamie turned at the mention of food, his eyes widening at the spread. "Can I have some, Mommy?" I nodded, though I remained standing while Jamie and Kat, who had silently materialized at the table, filled small plates. Volkov watched me with that same intense gaze that made me feel transparent, as if he could see every thought, every fear, every desperate calculation I was making. "You didn't sleep last night," he observed casually. "The circles under your eyes. You were worried about our meeting, wouldn't you be? A stranger gives my son hundreds of dollars, knows my full name, knows about my ex, arranges medical appointments we didn't ask for." I kept my voice low, mindful of Jamie happily devouring a chocolate-filled pastry nearby. "What am I supposed to think? That I have resources you need," he replied simply. He moved to the silver carafe and poured 2 cups of coffee, offering one to me. "And that we share a common interest in Nicholas Foster." I accepted the coffee but didn't drink. "What did he take from you?" Volkov's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Something irreplaceable. Money?" A short, humorless laugh. "If only it were so simple." He sipped his coffee, his eyes never leaving mine. "Tell me, Elena, what exactly did Nicholas tell you about his work?" I frowned, trying to recall those early days with Nick. "He said he was a consultant, he'd security or something. He traveled a lot." "And you never questioned why an IT consultant could afford a 3-bedroom condo in Lincoln Park, the weekend trips to New York, the Rolex watches?" My cheeks burned with remembered shame. Of course I'd questioned it, in the beginning. But Nick had answers for everything. Successful investments, a generous family inheritance, lucrative side projects he couldn't discuss due to NDAs. And I, 22 and dazzled by attention from a handsome, seemingly successful man, had chosen to believe him. "I was young," I said simply. "And stupid." Volkov's gaze softened slightly. "Youth is not a crime. Naivety is not a sin." He set down his cup. "Nicholas Foster is not what he claimed to be. He is not an IT consultant. He is a thief. A very specialized one. He steals information, identities, access, and occasionally physical objects of particular value." My stomach clenched. I'd suspected Nick wasn't entirely legitimate, especially after he vanished with our savings. But hearing it confirmed was different. "And he stole something from you?" "Yes." Volkov's jaw tightened. 2 things, actually. A flash drive containing extremely sensitive information, and my sister's heart. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "Your sister?" "Irina." He gestured toward Kat, who was helping Jamie feed apple slices to a peacock that had wandered into the pavilion. Katerina's twin. Nicholas seduced her to gain access to my private servers. He used her, just as he used you. But Irina... His voice hardened. Irina believed he loved her. Understanding dawned, cold and nauseating. She was the girlfriend, the one he left with. Volkov nodded once. He disappeared with her 2 years ago. Vanished completely, along with the data he stole and several million in cash and jewelry. I stared at Kat, seeing her now with new eyes, the cold detachment, the careful assessment when she'd looked at Jamie. She was the sister of the woman Nick had chosen over me, the woman he'd presumably been with all along, while I was raising his child alone. "I'm sorry," I said, the words inadequate. "But I don't understand what this has to do with me. I haven't seen or heard from Nick in 2 years. I have no idea where he is." "But you have something far more valuable than information," Volkov said, his gaze sliding to Jamie. "You have his son." A chill ran through me, instinctive and primal. "If you think I'm using my child as bait..." "No," he interrupted, raising a hand. "That's not what I'm suggesting." "Then what exactly are you suggesting?" Volkov stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, the same subtle, expensive scent I'd noticed yesterday. "Nicholas has surfaced, here in Chicago. My sources tell me he's desperate, hunting for something, and I believe that something is Jamie." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "That's impossible. He left us. He doesn't care about Jamie, perhaps," Volkov agreed. "Or perhaps what Nicholas stole from me has proven less valuable than he hoped. Perhaps he's realized that the only truly irreplaceable thing in his life is his son." "Nick doesn't think that way," I insisted, but doubt was already creeping in. Nick had been many things. Charming, selfish, manipulative, but he'd never been overtly cruel to Jamie. He'd even seemed to enjoy being a father, in his casual, intermittent way. "Why would he come back now?" "That's what I intend to find out," Volkov replied. "But in the meantime, you and Jamie are vulnerable. Nicholas knows where you live. He knows your routines, your weaknesses. If he wants to take Jamie, he won't." I cut in fiercely. "I'd die before I let that happen." "A sentiment I admire," Volkov said quietly, "but one that might not be necessary if you accept my help." I laughed bitterly. "Your help? What exactly are you offering, and what do you want in return? Because men like you don't do anything without expecting something back." Something flashed in his eyes, approval, perhaps, at my directness. "Protection," he said, "for you and Jamie. A new apartment in a secure building that I own. A job, if you want it. And in return, you allow me to use your connection to Nicholas to draw him out. Use me as bait, you mean? I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial cooperation." I shook my head, disbelieving. "And if I refuse?" His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A subtle reminder of the power differential between us. "Then you return to your apartment with the $700 I gave you. And you hope that Nicholas doesn't find you before you find another solution to your situation." It wasn't quite a threat, but the implication was clear. I glanced at Jamie, still blissfully focused on the tigers, unaware of the dangerous currents swirling around him. If Nick really was back, if he really wanted Jamie for whatever reason, how could I protect my son alone? I was one woman with no resources, no family, no support system. "What kind of job?" I asked finally, hating myself for even considering his offer. Volkov's expression remained neutral, but I sensed he knew he'd won. "I own several businesses. One is a small art gallery in River North. The current manager is leaving. The position would be yours if you want it. The hours are flexible, the pay is good, and Jamie would be welcome there after school." "I don't know anything about art." "You're intelligent. You can learn." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Elena, I'm not offering charity. I'm offering an exchange, your cooperation for my protection. It's your choice." I looked away from his intense gaze, my thoughts racing. Everything in me screamed that this was dangerous, that Volkov was dangerous. But the alternative, waiting for Nick to potentially reappear, with no resources to protect Jamie, seemed worse. "I need to think about it," I said finally. Of course. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a key card. The doctor's appointment for Jamie is still arranged for this afternoon. Afterward, my driver will take you to see the apartment. Think of it as a preview of what I'm offering. No commitment required today. I hesitated, then took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. Why are you really doing this? I asked. It can't just be about what Nick stole. Something dark and unreadable passed through his eyes. Let's just say I understand what it means to protect family at any cost. He glanced at Jamie. Some debts can never be repaid. Some wounds never heal. But justice is always possible. Before I could respond, Jamie came bounding over, his face alight with excitement. Mommy! Mommy! The tiger looked right at me, and Miss Cat says there are lion cubs we can see next. Can we go, please? I forced a smile, pushing aside the weight of the conversation. Of course we can, sweetheart. Volkov crouched down to Jamie's level, his entire demeanor transforming in a way that surprised me. Gone was the intimidating power broker, replaced by someone warmer, almost gentle. The lion cubs are excellent, he told Jamie seriously. But have you seen the wolves yet? They're my personal favorite. Jamie's eyes widened. Real wolves? Like in my book? Just like in your book, Volkov confirmed. Except these ones won't huff and puff and blow your house down. Jamie giggled. That's the three little pigs. Wolves in real books don't talk. My mistake, Volkov said, his mouth quirking in a genuine smile that transformed his face. He glanced up at me, and for a moment, I glimpsed something unexpected. A flash of genuine warmth, quickly masked. Perhaps, he suggested, straightening, we could all visit the wolves together. I happen to know the keeper. He might let Jamie feed them their morning meal. I opened my mouth to refuse, to maintain some boundary, some distance, but Jamie's pleading expression stopped me. Please, Mommy. I've never fed a real wolf before, and so I found myself walking through Lincoln Park Zoo beside Alexander Volkov, watching in stunned silence as he lifted Jamie onto his shoulders for a better view of the wolf enclosure, listening to him explain in patient detail the differences between wolves and dogs to my enraptured son. Kat walked a few paces behind us, her attention seemingly on her phone, but her eyes constantly scanning our surroundings with professional vigilance. The wolf keeper, a bearded man who greeted Volkov with obvious respect, did indeed allow Jamie to help feed the wolves, from a safe distance, with proper supervision. My son's face as he pushed pieces of raw meat through a special feeding tube was a mixture of terror and delight that I wished I could photograph. He's a good boy, Volkov commented, as we watched Jamie chattering excitedly with the keeper. Brave, curious, like his mother. I glanced at him, surprised by the compliment. You don't know me? I know enough, he replied. I know you've raised him alone. I know you've sacrificed everything for him. I know you were willing to sell his beloved bicycle to feed him. These are not small things, Elena. There was a sincerity in his voice that caught me off guard. He's my son, I said simply. What choice did I have? There are always choices, Volkov said quietly. Many parents make different ones. Before I could respond, Jamie came running back, his eyes bright with excitement. Mommy, the wolves know their names. The keeper called Lobo and he came right over. Can we get a wolf, please? I laughed despite myself. I think our apartment is a little small for a wolf, honey. Not your current apartment, Volkov interjected smoothly, but the new one has a private garden. Perhaps a dog would be possible. He looked directly at me as he said it, a clear reminder of his offer. Jamie gasped. A garden? And a dog? Really? He turned his pleading eyes to me, and I felt the trap closing around us. A trap baited with security, comfort, and the simple joys my son deserved. We'll see, I said noncommittally, but Volkov's knowing smile told me he understood exactly how effectively he'd played his hand. As the morning stretched into afternoon, I found myself increasingly confused by Alexander Volkov. The dangerous, powerful man who had appeared in our lives so suddenly kept being replaced, momentarily, by someone who patiently answered Jamie's endless questions, who knew the names of every animal in the zoo, who bought my son an ice cream cone and didn't even blink when most of it ended up on his expensive shirt. But then I would catch him scanning the crowds with calculating eyes, or notice the subtle communications between him and Kat, or remember the controlled menace in his voice when he spoke of Nick, and the illusion would shatter. This was still a man who had found us with disturbing ease, who knew details of our lives he shouldn't know, who had maneuvered us expertly into a position where his offer seemed like the only reasonable choice. "It's time for Jamie's appointment," Kat announced as we exited the reptile house. "The car is waiting." I tensed, my momentary comfort evaporating. This was it. The moment when we would have to decide whether to get into a car with these people, to trust them enough to take my son to a doctor I'd never met. Volkov must have sensed my hesitation. "Elena," he said quietly, drawing me slightly aside while Kat showed Jamie a colorful parrot perched near the exit. "I understand your caution. If you prefer, you can take a taxi to the doctor's office. The appointment is legitimate. Dr. Lowell is one of the best pediatric ENT specialists in the city." I studied his face, trying to discern his true intentions. "And after the appointment, the choice is yours," he said simply. "My driver will be available to take you to see the apartment, or you can go home. Think about my offer. Call me when you've decided." "Me." The sincerity in his voice seemed genuine, but I'd been fooled by charming men before. Still, something told me that whatever Volkov's ulterior motives might be, he wouldn't harm Jamie. The way he'd interacted with my son throughout the morning had been too natural, too unguarded, to be entirely an act. "We'll take the car to the doctor," I decided finally. "After that, we'll see." He nodded, accepting my conditional trust as a small victory. "One more thing," he added, his voice dropping even lower. "If Nicholas contacts you in any way, call me immediately, day or night. Promise me this, Elena." The intensity in his eyes was unsettling. "I promise," I said, though I doubted Nick would suddenly reappear after 2 years of silence. But as Jamie and I followed Kat to a sleek black car waiting at the zoo entrance, Volkov's warning echoed in my mind. For the first time, I allowed myself to truly consider the possibility that Nick might come back, not for me, but for Jamie. And if he did, I realized with growing certainty, I would need more than locks on my door and $700 in my pocket to keep my son safe. I would need someone like Alexander Volkov, someone with power, resources, and a personal vendetta against Nicholas Foster. The question was, could I trust him? And more importantly, could I afford not to? Dr. Lowell's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming medical building on Michigan Avenue, with views of the lake that must have cost a fortune. The waiting room looked more like a luxury hotel lobby than a doctor's office, with plush leather chairs, contemporary art on the walls, and a reception desk staffed by a woman who greeted us by name before we'd even introduced ourselves. "Mrs. Parker and Jamie," she said warmly. "Dr. Lowell is expecting you. Please, make yourselves comfortable." It won't be long. I perched uncomfortably on the edge of a leather chair, hyper-aware of my worn jeans and simple t-shirt in these opulent surroundings. Jamie, however, was immediately drawn to a corner of the waiting room that had been designed for children, complete with tablets loaded with games and a small aquarium with tropical fish. "Look at the blue one, Mommy," he called, pressing his nose against the glass. "Don't tap on the tank, sweetheart," I reminded him automatically, my mind still processing the events of the morning. It had been surreal, watching Jamie interact with Alexander Volkov at the zoo. My son, usually shy with strangers, had taken to the man with an ease that both worried and fascinated me. And Volkov himself had shown a side I hadn't expected, patient, knowledgeable, almost warm when speaking to Jamie. It didn't align with the dangerous, calculating image I'd formed of him, and that inconsistency made me uneasy. "Mrs. Parker?" A nurse in elegant navy scrubs appeared at a doorway. "We're ready for Jamie now." The examination was thorough but quick. Dr. Lowell, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes, examined Jamie's ears with specialized equipment, asked him several questions about the pain and his hearing, and then turned to me with a reassuring smile. "The infection is responding well to the antibiotics," he said, "but I'm concerned about some fluid buildup behind his eardrum. It's not uncommon, especially with recurring infections, but we'll want to monitor it. Recurring? I echoed, confused. This is his first ear infection. Dr. Lowell glanced down at the tablet in his hands, frowning slightly. My notes indicate Jamie has had 3 ear infections in the past 18 months. I shook my head, a chill running through me. That's not possible. I would know if... And then it hit me. The weekends Jamie had spent with Nick before he disappeared, the times he'd come home cranky, tugging at his ear, and Nick had casually mentioned that Jamie had seemed a little off, but was probably just tired. I had assumed it was the disruption to his routine, the excitement of time with his father. His father, I said slowly. He used to have weekend visits. He might have taken Jamie to a doctor without telling me. Dr. Mine. Lowell's expression shifted subtly. I see. Well, regardless of the history, we need to address the current situation. I'm going to prescribe a different antibiotic, along with some drops to help with the fluid. I'd like to see Jamie again in 2 weeks. After writing the prescriptions and giving Jamie a colorful sticker for being the bravest patient of the day, Dr. Lowell escorted us back to reception. The woman behind the desk handed me a folder containing the prescriptions, care instructions, and, to my surprise, an insurance card with Jamie's name on it. Your coverage has been updated in our system, she informed me. The medications are fully covered and there's no copay for today's visit. I stared at the insurance card, my suspicions confirmed. Volkov's reach extended even here, arranging medical care and coverage we hadn't had in months, not since I'd lost my last job with benefits. Part of me wanted to refuse it, to maintain some independence, but Jamie's health had to come first. Thank you, I said quietly, tucking the card into my wallet. Outside, the black car was waiting exactly where it had dropped us off. The driver, a stone-faced man built like a linebacker, held the door open without a word. Kat was nowhere to be seen. Where's Ms. Orlova? I asked, as Jamie climbed eagerly into the back seat, already chattering about the fish in the doctor's office. Ms. Orlova had other business to attend to, the driver replied, his voice surprisingly gentle for such an imposing man. Mr. Volkov asked me to show you the apartment, if you're still interested. I hesitated, one foot on the curb, one hand on the car door. This was the moment to decide. To continue down this path with Volkov, or to walk away while I still could. But walk away to what? Our dingy apartment with its leaking ceiling and roach problem? The constant struggle to make ends meet? The new fear that Nick might reappear to claim Jamie? Yes, I said finally. We'd like to see the apartment. 20 minutes later, we pulled up in front of a renovated brownstone in Lincoln Park, just a few blocks from where Jamie and I had stood yesterday with his bicycle. The contrast couldn't have been starker. From selling a child's bike on the street to viewing an apartment in one of the city's most desirable neighborhoods. This is it? I asked skeptically as the driver opened my door. The building was beautiful but understated. Nothing like the flashy high-rises I'd imagined Volkov would own. Mr. Volkov prefers privacy and security over ostentation, the driver explained, leading us to a private entrance at the side of the building. He swiped a keycard similar to the one Volkov had given me, and a heavy door unlocked with a soft click. The elevator requires the same card. The elevator opened directly into the apartment, or rather, what I soon realized was a 2-story penthouse that occupied the top floors of the building. I stepped out into a spacious living area with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a sweeping view of the park and the lake beyond. The furnishings were elegant but comfortable. A plush sectional sofa, a dining table that could seat 8, an open kitchen with gleaming appliances I barely recognized. Wow! Jamie exclaimed, breaking free of my hand to run across the polished hardwood floors. Mommy, look at the TV. It's bigger than our whole apartment. He wasn't exaggerating by much. The television mounted on one wall was massive, flanked by built-in bookshelves filled with books, some of which I noted with surprise were children's titles. There are 3 bedrooms, the driver informed us, standing respectfully by the elevator. The master suite is through those doors, and the 2 smaller bedrooms are up the stairs. One has been prepared for the boy. Something in his tone made me glance at him sharply. Prepared how? Instead of answering, he gestured toward the spiral staircase. Perhaps you should see for yourself. Curious and increasingly uneasy, I followed Jamie, who was already halfway up the stairs. At the top was a short hallway with 2 doors. Jamie pushed open the first one and froze in the doorway, a gasp escaping him. "Mommy," he whispered. It's... I peered over his shoulder and felt my own breath catch. The room had been decorated as a perfect little boy fantasy. One wall painted with a mural of a jungle scene complete with tigers and wolves, a bed shaped like a race car, shelves filled with toys and games, and in the corner, a child-sized desk with art supplies and a small laptop. But what made my blood run cold were the details. The exact same bedspread Jamie had on our sofa bed at home, a stuffed wolf identical to the one he'd reluctantly left behind at his last doctor's appointment because it was too dirty, books we'd borrowed repeatedly from the library but could never afford to buy. Even the nightlight next to the bed was the same solar system projector Jamie had begged for at a museum gift shop months ago. This wasn't just a room prepared for a child. It was a room prepared specifically for Jamie, with details no one could have known without observing us closely or entering our apartment. "Do you like it?" Jamie asked, looking up at me with shining eyes. "It's the best room ever." I forced a smile, not wanting to alarm him. "It's very nice, honey. Why don't you explore while I talk to the driver?" I closed the door gently and turned to the man, who had followed us upstairs. "How long?" I demanded, keeping my voice low. "How long has Volkov been watching us?" The driver's expression remained impassive. "I'm not at liberty to discuss Mr. Volkov's affairs." "This isn't an affair," I hissed. "This is my life. My son's life. There are things in that room that are exact copies of Jamie's possessions, things no one could know about without..." I trailed off, the implications sinking in. "Has he been inside our apartment? Mr. Volkov is a thorough man." The driver replied carefully. "When he takes an interest in something, or someone, he likes to be fully informed. And how long has he been taking an interest in us?" The driver hesitated, then said simply, "Since Nicholas Foster resurfaced 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, we'd been watched, studied, our lives catalogued in preparation for Volkov's approach. The thought made me feel violated, exposed in a way that went beyond physical vulnerability. "Why didn't he just come to us then?" I demanded. "Why wait until Jamie and I were desperate enough to be selling his bicycle on the street?" A flicker of something, compassion, perhaps, crossed the driver's stoic features. "That, I believe, you should ask Mr. Volkov directly." From the bedroom, I could hear Jamie's delighted exclamations as he discovered each new treasure. Despite my anger and unease, I couldn't deny the joy in his voice, joy I hadn't been able to give him in too long. "The master bedroom is through here," the driver continued, gesturing to the door at the end of the hall. "Mr. Volkov thought you might appreciate the privacy." The bedroom was as tastefully appointed as the rest of the apartment, with a king-sized bed, a sitting area by the window, and a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a spa. Like Jamie's room, this one contained disturbing personal touches. The same lavender body wash I used, the brand of face cream I splurged on once a year, a throw pillow in the exact shade of blue I'd once told a sales clerk was my favorite color. "The kitchen is fully stocked," the driver informed me as we returned downstairs. "And there's a tablet on the counter with information about the building, including security features and contact numbers." I nodded numbly, still processing the extent of Volkov's surveillance and preparation. Part of me wanted to grab Jamie and flee, to run as far as possible from Volkov's web of control and manipulation. But another part, a part I wasn't proud of, looked at this beautiful, safe space and thought of how Jamie's face had lit up at the room designed just for him. "Mr. Volkov will call you this evening," the driver said, moving toward the elevator. "He suggested you might want time to acclimate." "Wait," I called as he stepped into the elevator. "What's your name?" He looked surprised by the question. "Mikhail." "Well, Mikhail, please tell Mr. Volkov that I expect a full explanation when he calls. About everything." Mikhail nodded once, his expression softening slightly. He anticipated you would. As the elevator doors closed, I sank onto the plush sofa, my mind racing. The apartment was beautiful, perfect in every way, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. Volkov had been watching us, studying us like specimens under a microscope. He'd prepared this place as a gilded cage, fitted precisely to our needs and preferences. And yet, And yet Jamie was upstairs, happier than I'd seen him in months. We were safe from eviction, from hunger, from the constant grinding anxiety of poverty. Jamie had medical care, toys, his own room. All the things I'd failed to provide him. The price was our independence, our privacy, and our involvement in whatever game Volkov was playing with Nick. A game that clearly had stakes high enough to warrant this level of investment and preparation. I moved to the wall of windows, looking out at the park where, just yesterday, Jamie had tried to sell his bicycle to feed me. The contrast was so stark it made my head spin. In 24 hours, we'd gone from desperate to, what? Protected? Imprisoned? Both? My phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number, but I knew immediately who it was from. The apartment meets with your approval? I typed back. How long have you been watching us? The reply came instantly. Long enough to know you deserve better than selling your son's bicycle on a street corner. My fingers trembled as I typed. And Jamie's room? The exact copies of his things? A longer pause this time. Then, I wanted him to feel at home. Children need stability. We had stability, I shot back. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. Was it? Came the reply, with eviction looming, with Nicholas potentially returning. That's not stability, Elena. That's standing on the edge of a cliff in a strong wind. I couldn't argue with that assessment, however much I wanted to. I was still formulating a response when another text arrived. Dinner will be delivered at 6. The kitchen is stocked if you prefer to cook. There are clothes for both of you in the closets. Make yourselves comfortable. We'll talk later. I set the phone down, torn between outrage at his presumption and a grudging appreciation for his thoroughness. Clothes, food, a safe place to sleep. All the things I'd been struggling to provide. Mommy! Jamie's voice drifted down from upstairs. There's a telescope up here, and it works. I can see the whole park. I closed my eyes briefly, weighing my options. We could leave right now, return to our apartment, cling to our independence, and face whatever came next alone. Or we could stay, accept Volkov's protection, and all that came with it, and navigate the dangerous waters of his vendetta against Nick. Coming, sweetheart, I called back, my decision made, at least for tonight. We would stay. We would sleep in clean beds with full stomachs. And tomorrow, when Volkov called, I would negotiate terms that kept Jamie safe while preserving what little autonomy I could salvage. As I climbed the stairs to join my son at the telescope, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a threshold from which there would be no return, that in accepting Volkov's help, I was binding us to him in ways I couldn't yet understand. But when I saw Jamie's face, alight with joy as he gazed at the world through a new lens, I knew I would make the same choice again. For him, I would deal with the devil himself, and Alexander Volkov, with his penetrating gaze and calculated generosity, might very well be exactly that. Look, Mommy, Jamie said, stepping aside to let me peer through the telescope. You can see forever from up here. I looked through the eyepiece, seeing the park spread out below us, people moving like miniature figures in a diorama. From this height, this distance, everything seemed orderly, manageable, safe. But I knew better. Down there, in the real world, danger lurked. Nick might be searching for us, and up here, in our luxurious new prison, Alexander Volkov was pulling strings I couldn't even see. Yes, I said softly, stroking Jamie's hair. But remember, sweetheart, things are never quite what they seem from a distance. He looked up at me, his innocent eyes trusting. What do you mean, Mommy? I smiled, pushing away my fears for the moment. Nothing important. Just that sometimes you have to get closer to understand what you're really seeing. And I had a feeling that in the days to come, I would be getting much closer to understanding exactly what Alexander Volkov wanted from us, and what price we would ultimately pay for his protection. The sun had just begun to set when the intercom chimed. Jamie, exhausted from exploring every inch of the apartment, was dozing on the sofa beside me, his head in my lap as I absently stroked his hair. Mrs. Parker, came a voice I recognized as Mikhail's. Dinner has arrived. Shall I send it up? I pressed the response button. Yes. Thank you. Minutes later, The elevator doors opened to reveal Mikhail with several bags from an upscale Italian restaurant. The delicious aroma of garlic and tomato sauce filled the apartment as he efficiently arranged containers on the dining table. "Mr. Volkov thought you might enjoy this," he explained, unpacking pasta, salad, breadsticks, and even a bottle of wine. "He'll be calling shortly after 7, if that's convenient." I nodded, noting that Mikhail seemed to be waiting for my explicit approval, a small courtesy that felt significant somehow. "That's fine. Thank you, Mikhail." As he turned to leave, I added, "The apartment is beautiful. You can tell him that much." A ghost of a smile touched his stoic features. "I will, Mrs. Parker." After he left, I gently woke Jamie. His sleepy delight at the feast spread before us temporarily pushed aside my misgivings. We ate at the elegant dining table, Jamie chattering about all the treasures he'd discovered in his room, me listening and smiling and trying to ignore the growing knot of tension in my stomach as 7 o'clock approached. At precisely 7:15, as I was clearing our dishes, my phone rang. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. "You enjoyed the pasta, I hope," Volkov said when I answered, his voice smooth and confident. "How did you—" I began, then cut myself off. "Never mind. Of course you know what we ate. You probably have cameras in here too." "No cameras," he replied, and I was surprised to detect a hint of something like offense in his tone. "I have respect for privacy, Elena. I simply ordered what most children enjoy." I snorted softly. "Respect for privacy? That's rich coming from someone who's been watching us for weeks." A pause. "Fair point, though I'd characterize it as keeping you safe rather than watching you." "Semantics," I countered, moving to the living room where I could keep an eye on Jamie, who was back at the telescope, happily stargazing, perhaps. Another pause. "You're angry about the room. It wasn't a question. Wouldn't you be? Finding out someone's been studying your life closely enough to recreate your child's belongings down to the smallest detail, it's invasive." "It was meant as a kindness," he said quietly. "Children need familiar things around them during transitions, but I understand how it appeared to you." The genuine contrition in his voice caught me off guard. "Why didn't you approach us 3 weeks ago?" I asked, changing tack. "Why wait until yesterday?" His sigh was barely audible through the phone. "I needed to understand who you were, Elena. Whether you were involved with Nicholas's schemes. Whether you might warn him if I approached you. And what conclusion did you reach? That you're fiercely protective of your son. That you're proud, resourceful, and stubborn to a fault. That you'd rather sell your child's beloved bicycle than ask for help." A beat. "And that Nicholas Foster is an even bigger fool than I thought for abandoning you." The unexpected compliment left me momentarily speechless. "I'm still not clear on what exactly you want from me," I said finally. "Your cooperation," he replied simply. "Nicholas has returned to Chicago for a reason. I believe that reason is Jamie, or rather what Jamie represents." "Which is what, exactly?" "Leverage," Volkov said. "The data Nicholas stole has proven difficult for him to sell. The kind of information it contains attracts dangerous buyers, the sort who find it more economical to simply eliminate the seller after obtaining the product." I sat down heavily on the sofa, the implications sinking in. "So he's running." "Yes. And he needs resources to disappear permanently. Resources he believes I might provide in exchange for the right incentive." "Jamie," I whispered, looking at my son silhouetted against the darkening sky, blissfully unaware of the danger surrounding him. "In part," Volkov conceded. "But also you." "Me?" I almost laughed. "Nick doesn't care about me. He proved that when he emptied our bank account and disappeared." "Perhaps," Volkov said, his tone measured. "Or perhaps he's realized his mistake. Regardless, he's been making inquiries about both of you, subtle ones. But my sources are extensive." A chill ran through me. "You think he's going to try to take Jamie?" "I think," Volkov replied carefully, "that Nicholas is desperate, and desperate men are unpredictable." I closed my eyes, processing this. If Nick really was back, if he really was desperate enough to use Jamie as leverage. The thought made me physically ill. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now, you and Jamie stay where you're safe. The building has security. Mikhail will be nearby. You'll start at the gallery next week if that suits you." Jamie will be enrolled in the private school 3 blocks away. His tone was matter-of-fact, as if these arrangements were already settled. And when Nicholas makes his move, which he will, we'll be ready. Just like that? We upend our entire lives on your say-so? Despite the logic of his plan, I bristled at his presumption. You can leave any time, he countered. The door isn't locked. But consider this, Elena. Can you protect Jamie from Nicholas alone? Do you have the resources, the knowledge, the power? The truth was, I didn't. And Volkov knew it. I want conditions, I said firmly. If we're doing this, we're doing it my way. A pause, then, I'm listening. No surveillance inside the apartment. Jamie's school and medical decisions are mine alone. I want a contract for the gallery job, a real one, with benefits and a fair salary. And I want to know exactly what happens when you find Nick. Reasonable terms, he replied, and I could almost hear the smile in his voice. Anything else? I took a deep breath. Yes. I want to know why you care so much. This can't just be about stolen data. This feels personal. The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally, he spoke, his voice lower, rougher somehow. Nicholas didn't just seduce my sister for information. He convinced her to go against her family. Against me. Then, when he had what he wanted, he abandoned her in a hotel room in Geneva with nothing but a note saying she'd served her purpose. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. Irina took her own life 3 days later, he continued, each word precise and weighted. She couldn't bear the shame, the betrayal. Nicholas didn't just steal data, Elena. He stole my sister's life. The raw pain in his voice stunned me. Suddenly, Volkov's obsessive pursuit of Nick, his protection of Jamie and me, it all made a terrible kind of sense. I didn't know, I whispered. Few do. A pause. Katerina has never been the same. We were triplets, you see. Irina, Katerina, and I. When she died, it was like losing a limb, like losing part of myself, triplets. That explained the intensity of his grief, the depth of his vendetta. In Volkov's position, I might want revenge just as badly. What will you do when you find him? I asked quietly. Do you really want to know? I considered that. No, I decided. I don't. But I want your word that Jamie will never know any of this, that he'll be protected from whatever happens. You have it, Volkov replied without hesitation. I would never harm a child, Elena, not even the child of the man who destroyed my sister. For some reason, I believed him. Then we have a deal, I said, making my decision. We'll stay. We'll help you find Nick, but remember, Jamie's safety comes first, always. On that at least, we are in perfect agreement, Volkov said. Get some rest, Elena. We'll speak more tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat in the dimming light of the luxurious apartment, watching my son as he continued his fascinated exploration of the night sky through the telescope. Everything had changed so rapidly. Our circumstances, our future, our safety. And at the center of it all was Alexander Volkov, a man driven by grief and vengeance, who had swept into our lives like a force of nature. I still didn't fully trust him, but I understood him now in a way I hadn't before. And understanding, I was beginning to realize, was its own kind of power. 2 months later, I stood in the quiet elegance of Volkov Gallery, making final adjustments to a new exhibition of emerging Russian artists. The space, with its gleaming hardwood floors and perfect lighting, had become familiar territory. To my surprise, I'd taken to the work naturally, my eye for detail and organization making me an effective manager. Jamie thrived in his new school, making friends and excelling in his classes. The ear infection was long gone, and regular checkups with Dr. Lowell had confirmed he was perfectly healthy. In the evenings, we would return to our apartment, which I had gradually come to think of as home, and Jamie would chatter about his day while I prepared dinner in the gleaming kitchen. Volkov himself had become a regular presence in our lives, stopping by the gallery frequently, occasionally joining us for dinner. To my ongoing surprise, he and Jamie had developed a genuine bond. Volkov taught him chess, brought him books on astronomy and wildlife, listened with serious attention to Jamie's endless questions about the world. And I found myself increasingly drawn to the complex, dangerous man who had rescued us from desperation. Beneath his controlled exterior was a depth of feeling I hadn't expected. Grief for his sister, yes, but also a capacity for kindness, for humor, for connection, that emerged gradually, like a plant slowly turning toward the sun. "The lighting is wrong on the Petrov piece," came a familiar voice from behind me. I turned to find Volkov standing in the gallery doorway, impeccably dressed as always in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. "It's not wrong," I countered. "It's intentionally shadowed to highlight the contrast in the lower quadrant." His lips quirked in that almost smile I'd come to recognize. "Always so confident in your opinions." "You hired me for my eye," I reminded him. "Not for my agreement," he chuckled, a warm sound that still surprised me whenever I heard it. "Indeed I did." He moved closer, studying the painting. "Perhaps you're right. It does have a certain tension this way." I smiled, pleased by his concession. These small victories felt significant somehow. "Jamie staying late at school today?" he asked, though I knew he was perfectly aware of my son's schedule. "Science club," I confirmed. "He's building a model of the solar system." Volkov nodded, his expression softening at the mention of Jamie. It was a transformation I'd observed repeatedly, the way his guarded demeanor lightened whenever my son was the subject. "There's been a development," he said, his tone shifting to something more serious. "Nicholas made contact yesterday." My breath caught. Despite 2 months of preparation, the reality of Nick's return still had the power to frighten me. With who? One of my associates. A carefully orchestrated chance meeting. Volkov's face was unreadable. "He's looking for a way to approach you, to reconnect with his son. And you're going to give it to him," I said, not a question. Volkov inclined his head slightly. "A charity gala, next Saturday. He'll believe one of the waitstaff is feeding him information, but of course, they work for me." The trap was closing. After weeks of subtle manipulation, Nick was being drawn precisely where Volkov wanted him. I'd known this was coming, had agreed to it, but now that the moment was approaching, I felt unexpectedly conflicted. "You're having second thoughts," Volkov observed, his perceptiveness as unsettling as ever. "Not second thoughts," I said slowly. "Just memories. It's strange to think of facing him again after everything that's happened." Volkov stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, a scent I'd come to associate with safety. Despite everything. "You don't have to do this, Elena. Say the word and I'll find another way." The offer surprised me. We had a deal. Deals can be renegotiated. His dark eyes studied mine. "Your comfort matters to me." It was the closest he'd come to acknowledging the shifting nature of our relationship. The tension that had been building between us over weeks of shared meals, of late-night conversations after Jamie was asleep, of moments when his hand had lingered on mine a second too long to be purely professional. "I want to see him," I decided. "I want him to see what he gave up. What he can never have again." Something fierce and approving flashed in Volkov's eyes. "As you wish." He was standing very close now, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Alexander," I said softly, using his first name deliberately. "When this is over, when you've found whatever closure you're looking for, what happens to us?" The question had been building for weeks, unasked but ever present between us. Now, with Nick's appearance imminent, I needed to know. He raised his hand, his fingers brushing my cheek with unexpected gentleness. "What do you want to happen, Elena?" I hesitated, gathering my courage. "I want Jamie to be safe, happy. I want to keep the life we've built here. And for yourself?" He pressed, his voice low. I met his gaze directly. "I want to stop being afraid of Nick, of poverty, of depending on someone who might disappear." I took a deep breath. "I want to trust again, even though it terrifies me." Understanding dawned in his eyes. Slowly, deliberately, he took my hand in his. "I am not Nicholas," he said, each word weighted with promise. "I do not abandon what is mine. Ever." The possession in his voice should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent a shiver of something like anticipation through me. Over these past months, I'd come to understand Alexander Volkov, his fierce loyalty, his protective instincts, his capacity for both ruthlessness and tenderness. I'd seen how he looked at Jamie with a care that went beyond strategy or manipulation, and I'd seen how he looked at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, with a hunger that matched my own growing desire. "And am I yours?" I asked, my voice barely audible. His fingers tightened around mine. "That, Elena, is entirely your decision." The gallery was silent around us, the afternoon light painting golden patterns across the polished floor. In that moment, I saw our future unfolding like a road with many possible turns. Some dangerous, some promising, all of them irrevocably changed by the man standing before me. "Yes," I said simply. And then, because courage comes in many forms, I leaned forward and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was brief, but definitive. A seal on an unspoken agreement. When I pulled back, Volkov's eyes had darkened, his controlled expression momentarily disrupted by something raw and powerful. "Saturday," he said, his voice rougher than before. "After the gala, Nicholas will be dealt with, and this chapter will be closed. And then, Elena Parker, you and I will begin something new." It was a promise and a warning both. I nodded, accepting all it implied. Saturday. As he left the gallery, his steps measured and purposeful, I turned back to the Russian paintings with their shadows and light, their hidden depths and stark beauty. Like the man who had collected them, they revealed themselves slowly, layer by layer, to those patient enough to look beyond the surface. Saturday would bring a confrontation 2 years in the making. Nick, the man who had abandoned us. Volkov, the man who had found us. And me, no longer the desperate, vulnerable woman selling her son's bicycle on a street corner, but someone stronger, more certain, more dangerous in her own way. Let Nick come, I thought, straightening the frame of the Petrov painting with steady hands. Let him see what his betrayal had created. Let him see the woman I had become, the life I had built from the ashes of his abandonment. Let him see the son he would never know, protected now by a man with the power and will to keep him safe forever, and let him understand, in his final moments of freedom, exactly what it had cost him to leave us behind. For the first time in years, I felt no fear when I thought of Nick, only a calm certainty that justice, in whatever form Alexander Volkov delivered it, was finally coming. And after that, justice was served, after the ghosts of betrayal were laid to rest, there would be a future waiting, for Jamie, for me, and for the dangerous, complex man who had claimed us as his own. Not a fairy tale ending, perhaps, but an ending that felt right, powerful and true, and earned through suffering and choice. An ending that was really a beginning, opening into a life I had never imagined but now reached for with both hands, eyes wide open, heart finally ready to trust again.